Hello and welcome to Confucianism Made Quick, a podcast where we discuss all things Confucianism. Confucianism is a group of political, social, and philosophical teachings about morals, rather than religion, originating from China, that puts heavy emphasis on the importance of relationships and values that create balance in society, causing society to prosper. Despite its origin in China, Confucianism was able to spread past its home boundaries and into other religions through force and influence, and it was able to impact China and these other regions socially and politically. Thus we, Gavin Brown, Alexandra Luna, Cooper Olson, and Ajane Watts will explore in this podcast how Confucianism, a collection of philosophical values, came to exist and rose in China, spread throughout the continent, impacted different aspects of life where Confucianism was dominant, and how women were treated.
Confucianism is the philosophy or religion based on the teachings of Master Kong. Confucianism emerged or developed in China around 400 BCE. Confucianism is the philosophy or religion based on the teachings of Master Kong. Confucianism emerged or developed in China around 400 BCE. Confucius was trying to rejuvenate some of the past traditions because originally the teachings and principles were developed during the Zhou dynasty in the 6th century BC. By the 2nd century BC, his ideas became an important aspiration during the Han dynasty throughout the high-class society. Confucius was a Chinese philosopher who was born around 551 BCE in Lu, China. The name Confucius is a Latinized form of Confuzi. Confucius lived from 551 to 479 BCE. He was also known to the Chinese as Kongzi, which means Master Kong, or Confuzi, which means Grandmaster Kong.
There is no God in Confucianism, rather a great ultimate. They called it Tao. Tao helped with change and betterment of individuals. Tao means something different to Confucians than to Taoists. To Confucians, it is a system for human behavior. It represented how people were supposed to act. Tao was more about philosophical and moral advice to the Confucians than as religion. They were more about doing the right thing than following God. The thought of Tao is not totally a religious idea, and that is what makes it a great ultimate and not a god. There were many other important figures to Confucianism. Xunzi, a Confucian philosopher in the classical period. He gave cohesiveness and comprehensiveness and set the Confucian future for 2,000 years. Another important figure is Kang Yui, who led the reform movement of 1898. And improve the intellectual development of today's China.
The values and beliefs of Confucianism, the teachings express avoiding conflict, maintaining correct behavior, and upholding strict morals. Out of these beliefs, there are 5 important virtues that guide people through their daily lives and promote harmony in society. The most important virtue is Ren, which emphasizes the humanity towards others and yourself, and is described as the saying, "Treat others as you want to be treated." Li stresses the importance of order and is referred to the guide of relationships and actions. Li also expresses the importance that people should be put in places that they belong socially, which is also known as the ratification of names, and Li expresses the importance of 5 relationships. These relationships are father and son expressing obedience, ruler and subject expressing loyalty and trust, brother and brother expressing respect, husband and wife expressing obedience, and friend expressing consideration. The balance in these relationships would allow for society to prosper, and family was the most important out of these relationships. Yi is about expressing righteousness. Yi expresses that one must perform actions because they are right to do so, regardless of consequences. Shao reflects filial piety and reverence. One must respect and revere their parents, give parents physical, emotional, and spiritual richness, and make one's family name known to show filial piety. Finally, She is moral wisdom that people know right from wrong, and people are born morally good but are tainted into evil due to needs, nature, society, culture, and the lack of knowledge.
Confucianism originated in China and began to establish its hearth within eastern China, eventually spreading to northern and southern Chinese provinces. Master Kong, a Chinese philosopher, made many advancements in the fundamentals of Confucian ideology during the spring and autumn period, and later developed by Mencius, who was a Confucian scholar during the Warring States period. Confucianism became popular among most of China as their population willingly converted. Soon, China started to influence many of their neighboring countries, such as Vietnam, Japan, and Korea. Korea was first conquered by the Han Dynasty in around 100 BCE. Much of Chinese culture was introduced to Korea as many Confucian universities became heavily common in Korean societies. Later, when Korea was reconquered by the Tang Dynasty, they made a deal which allowed for Korean scholars to freely travel to Chinese libraries and universities to study Confucianism, and eventually Korean officials willingly adopted many Confucian ideas into their culture. Japan was never directly conquered by Chinese forces. Rather, they willingly included Confucian methods into their societies because they acknowledged the success which the Tang rulers had as a result of Confucianism. In Vietnam, however, China directly enforced Confucianism into their culture. Though Vietnam was heavily influenced by Chinese, their strong religious and cultural foundation prevented them from full assimilation into Chinese culture, but they did use certain Confucian strategies and ideas to better rule and organize these people. Confucianism did create a social structure. Their rules and practices are based on relationships and recognizing one's order in society. The 5 key relationships consist of fathers above sons, husbands above wives, older siblings above younger siblings, rulers above subjects, and friends are equal to friends. Confucianism also highlighted filial piety, which represents the importance in honoring elder family members. There's also an emphasis between the distinction of women and men, especially women's lack of roles within society. Their social structure, however, did not necessarily separate wealthy to poor, as a civil service exam which was used to establish their bureaucracy allowed for poor scholars to work in the state system if they had passed the exam. All in all, these core values are the foundation to the social structure in Confucianism, as they distinguish specific roles between relationships and people in society.
By 1450, most of Confucianism was practiced in eastern China. It started in China in 6th century BCE and remained dominant there still by 1450. It did spread to Taiwan, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. All these countries surrounding were impacted by what they saw in China. Some of the countries had Confucianism as a second religion. Japan primarily had Buddhism as their religion, and Confucianism was their secondary. Confucianism was regionally dominant in China because it was founded there, and it continued to be their primary religion for over 2,000 years.
Confucianism heavily impacted politics in China and regions China had influence over, due to Confucianism being a political philosophy that was made key in government. Confucianism was incorporated into Chinese government as the bureaucracy was a civil service exam. Confucianism promotes the will of the wise instead of the many, and the civil service exam shows this concept since it put skilled and wise people into the government. This exam determined a civilian's best skills and put them into the correct positions based upon their skills. This reflects the Confucius value of people having purposes in society and having an organized society, and it also reflects the values leader-subject relationship of Confucianism. The exam established a further trust and respect between the emperor and their subjects because the emperor would trust the delegates to make the right decisions, displaying yi as well, and there was a natural trust and respect that the delegates had for the emperor on the other side of the relationship. Confucianism also influenced the state to promote well-being throughout a society so that a society could prosper. Despite Confucianism dominating China, Confucianism had an impact on the government in Vietnam and Japan. In Vietnam, a bureaucracy was established with the Chinese examination system to staff the bureaucracy, and in Japan, a bureaucracy filled with soldiers loyal to the emperor was instituted, displaying the effect of China's Confucian government.
The treatment and the way women live in relation to males through Confucianism is not particularly fair. They had a distant separation of the genders, and the rules of Confucianism limits the power of women. The main role for women was mainly focused on motherhood, taking care of large households, and to respect elders and ancestors, but specifically the males. Education was not popular or at times allowed, only limited in order for the women to teach their sons if needed. Confucian principle has 3 obediences. A woman's first obedience is to her father before she is married, to her husband while she is married, and to her son after the husband dies. The men were formally the heads of the family and held legal power over women and their children in the household. Confucianism has a patriarchal belief system in which the father or oldest male held the primary power and authority in the household. Women were powerless against their husbands and fathers.
Thank you for tuning in to Group 3's Confucianism podcast by Gavin Brown, Cooper Olson, Ajane Watts, and Ali Luna.